Hello, and greetings to all you fans of RPGs, and of Dungeons & Dragons. On behalf of RPGmodsFan, I will be narrating this video. In this walkthrough video, we will be reviewing the fourth adventure in the Candlekeep Mysteries anthology book. The book itself was published by Wizards of the Coast in January of 2021. This 5th edition D&D adventure is titled A Deep and Creeping Darkness, and it was written by Sarah Madsen. The adventure is meant for 4th level player characters. The adventure starts as follows. Decades and decades ago, Vermelon was a platinum mining village, located high in the mountains. Inexplicably, the village was abandoned. The player characters were hired by a mining and exploration group, to find out what happened to Vermelon. Will the book they were given by the group be enough to allow them entry into Candlekeep? Well, that is for the players and the dungeon master to play out. When the player characters do get into Candlekeep, the most insightful book they find is titled, A Deep and Creeping Darkness. It was written by a bard, who interviewed refugees from the village. And thus, the mystery of what happened at Vermelon, and the A Deep and Creeping Darkness adventure continues.
Hello, my name is Allan. I am the former keeper of tomes. Some time ago, the task of governing Candlekeep has been turned over to the Archmage Janusi. Anyway, my assistant, RPGmodsFan, will now be discussing the adventure itself, and this video will contain spoilers. Unless you are a dungeon master who will be running this adventure for their players, or are a player who already played through this adventure and are watching this video for nostalgia purposes, I would suggest not to watch the rest of this video.
The synopsis of the adventure would be as follows. A book describing a mining disaster prompts adventurers to search for a missing town. This mystery keeps players guessing until the end, and makes clever use of a rarely used D&D monster. Like most of the adventures in Candlekeep Mysteries, A Deep and Creeping Darkness did not include an adventure overview or summary. As RPGmodsFan stated in his prior videos, Candlekeep Mysteries would have benefited having an adventure overview for each of its adventures. We would summarize the adventure as follows. The player characters were hired to find out what happened to the mountainside mining village of Vermelon. They go to Candlekeep to gain some insight. There, they come across a book titled A Deep and Creeping Darkness, authored by a bard, who conducted interviews with refugees from the village. It recounts the tale of the mining explosion tragedy that would kill more than half the miners. Afterwards, citizens of the village were gripped with fear, having nightmares, and slowly disappearing. The remaining villagers became convinced Vermelon was cursed and abandoned it. On their journey to Vermelon, the player characters stop in Mayrin, which is the nearest town to Vermelon. At Mayrin, they interview 2 locals, who were originally from Vermelon, before they continue on their journey to the village. By exploring Vermelon and the platinum mine, the adventurers learn, due to the terror arising immediately after the explosion, a nest of meanlocks manifested in the mines. Meanlocks are creatures from the Fey Wild, and psychically feed on fear. The villagers' growing fear allowed the meanlocks to grow in number and kidnap the villagers. In order to lift the villagers' curse, the adventurers will need to eliminate the nest of meanlocks. I will now go through the adventure's timeline of events, and, sorry for the repetition. I will be repeating many things I already have mentioned in the adventure overview section of this video. Vermelon was a mining village located high in the mountains. Most of the villagers were miners mining mainly for platinum. About 70 years ago, an explosion rocked the mine. Half of miners, or about 30 miners, were instantly killed. Out of the remaining 30 or so miners, about 19 miners were dug up and rescued. Meanlocks are creatures from the Fey Wild, and are spawned by intense fear in areas where the border with the Fey Wild is thin. After the initial explosion, the surviving miners were all in a state of terror. Their intense fear allowed the meanlocks to spawn in the mines, and form a nest. The 11 miners, who were never found, were most likely captured, and transformed into more meanlocks. 4 meanlocks can telepathically torment one incapacitated creature. Via this torment, it is possible for the creature to die, and be transformed into a new meanlock. It is in this manner that the villages began to disappear, starting with the survivors of the mining disaster. The villagers then became convinced their village was cursed, and abandoned it. Sometime afterwards, most of the Meenlocks returned to the Fey Wild, but 6 do remain. The player characters were hired by a mining and exploration group to find out what happened to Ver Melon. They were given a book that, barely, allowed them entry into Candlekeep. The book they found most insightful is A Deep and Creeping Darkness. It was written by a bard, who interviewed the refugees from the village. It gives an account from the villagers' perspective, starting with the mine explosion, then villagers disappearing, and ending in the abandonment of the village. What caused the disappearances is still a mystery, that the player characters need to solve. The adventurer's journey to May Rin, which lies at the foot of a mountain range, and is the nearest town to Ver Melon. At May Rin, the player characters interview 2 former residents of Ver Melon. Former miner, Lucas Grosvenor, is a very old man, and is the owner of the Bored Weasel Tavern and Inn. His wife, who was also a miner, died in the disaster. The morning, Lucas left the village before the disappearances started. When Lucas learns the adventurers will go to Ver Melon, he asks them to place flowers on his wife's grave, and to retrieve her old necklace. Astra Vaughn is a half-elf, and is a florist. He was young at the time. His family fled Ver Melon when Astra's mother began experiencing nightmares. Unbeknownst to Astra's family, the cause of her nightmares was that she was being telepathically tormented by the Meenlocks. These 2 NPCs do not actually have any pertinent or helpful information as to what happened in Ver Melon's calamity. So the player characters will need to journey to Ver Melon, in order to find more information, and solve the mystery. If the dungeon master wishes, he or she can add a wilderness combat encounter with rampaging wildlife or marauder bandits before they get to the village. Because of the Meenlocks, to me, it does not make sense to have an encounter with bandits. I would make this combat on the characters rough, not deadly, but rough. So that, they will want to take a long rest. This way, the Meenlocks can psychically attack one or more of the characters in their incapacitated state. Some further notes on Meenlocks. Meenlocks shun light. They also avoid direct confrontation, they try to remain unseen, and they try to psychically haunt the player characters. One or more of the player characters may experience hallucinations or even nightmares. The former mayor of Ver Melon is now a Meenlock, and can be encountered in her house. There are also clues to what happened to the village in the house. Deep in the platinum mine is the lair of the Meenlocks. The Meenlocks have rigged their lair with dynamite traps. If the battle goes against them, they will then try to trigger these traps as a last resort. If the player characters have cleared out the nest of Meenlocks, and then inform their employers, and/or the citizens of May Rin, then, after quite some time, the village will be revived, and be active again. If you want to learn more about Meenlocks, their habitats, and their tactics, then I would recommend watching Bill Allan World's video on them. Link to his video will be in the description section below. On their journey to Ver Melon, I would have the player characters roll perception checks. For those that succeed, I would say that it is strange that they have not come across bandits or have seen any signs of them. The undefended and unmaintained road to Ver Melon is full of prime spots for bandits to set up ambushes in. Labeled on the screen are the village's places of interest. As you can see, there are few places of interest. This was probably due to the restraint of keeping the adventures short in page length. I would suggest to DMs to add descriptions and items to the other crumbled houses. What separates good DMs from great DMs is that a great DMs will avoid giving repeated generic descriptions of generic rooms, areas, or buildings. In the middle of the road into the village is an abandoned cart. Less than a year ago, a traveling merchant was taken by the Meenlocks. Building V1 was once the village's magic shop and blacksmith. Their owners hid their valuables under a false floor panel, thinking they would return once the supposed curse of the village was over. They never returned. In front of the former mayor's house is a large dead tree. Lay Duvezin was the mayor of the village. Fearing for their lives, she sent away her 2 children, and her partner. Mayor Duvezin stayed behind, and was determined to find the cause of the disappearances, and put a stop to them. She was the last villager taken by the Meenlocks. The Meenlock she was transformed into can be encountered in the house. If the adventurers kill the Meenlock, then they will notice the mayor's signet ring on one of its fingers, giving a strong clue as to the fate of the villagers who disappeared. Oh, and by the way, there are 2 more mean locks lurking in the village to psychically haunt the player characters. Displayed on the screen is the layout of the mayor's house. It will probably be easier to decipher the rooms labeled. The one thing you probably noticed is that the house does not have a kitchen. Meals were prepared in the village, and then brought to the house. As a DM, I would try to delay any physical combat with the mean lock till after the player characters have searched the house's library. Actually, as a DM, I would move the library down to the ground floor. The entryway is large enough to accommodate such a room. In the master bedroom, the adventurers can find the mayor's journal. The journal chronicles the disaster at the mine, and the villagers' anguish over the next few weeks. The last few pages speak of the mayor's nightmares, of her creeping fear, and waking in a terrified state, with lingering screams echoing in her ears. Next to the journal, I would add a scroll of Remove Curse. Or you can have the scroll located in the library, instead. Anyway, in the mayor's journal, also add that the mayor bought 3 such scrolls. She used up 2 of the scrolls. Each was used a week apart. A week after using the second scroll, the mayor came to the conclusion that a Remove Curse spell is not going to work. Okay, back to the library. In the library, several books lay open on a table. One of them is a book about mean locks. To give your players a good scare, I would have another open book that is about mine flayers. Displayed on the screen is the map of the Platinum Mine. Overlaid on the map is now the area names. The mine explosion occurred beyond the area marked M4. The area is now completely caved in. The lair of the mean locks is within the area displayed on the screen. The tunnels are not part of mine. Instead, they were manifested by the mean locks. The tunnels are nearly circular, with black moss covering the walls, floors, and ceilings. The black moss in area M6 will animate, forming tentacles that would try to grapple the player characters who are within reach. There are several large pools in area M8. For some reason, this area reminds me of the room of pools in the B1 module. Anyway, the author of the adventure suggests having a black pudding or any other type of ooze in one of the pools. If they have not already been transformed, any victims the mean locks manage to capture are brought to chamber numbered M9, paralyzed, and put on a slab. Here the telepathic torment continues until the victim is transformed into a mean lock. All remaining mean locks will make their last stand here. They have rigged this chamber with dynamite traps. If the battle goes against them, and as a last resort, they will then try to trigger these traps. The adventure is considered concluded when the player characters have cleared out the nest of mean locks. If the characters inform their employers and/or the citizens of Mayrin, then, after some time, Vermelon will be revived and be active again. As I stated in my walkthrough video on The Joy of Extra-Dimensional Spaces, the Dungeon Master can integrate that adventure with this one by having the player characters originally from Vermelon. Have the abandonment of the village occur some time after the player character's journey to Candlekeep. In The Joy of Extra-Dimensional Spaces, Martynas, the sage who can supposedly lift the curse, was killed by a wimpy imp. Now the player characters need to go on a few additional quests to A. Raise enough money to raise Martynas from the dead, or B. Raise enough money to hire another sage, or C. The other sage may ask the player characters to undertake an additional quest to secure his/her services. When the sage and the player characters reach Vermelon, the sage realizes Vermelon's curse cannot be lifted through traditional means, and run a deep and creeping darkness as written from that point forward. Because Candlekeep Mysteries adventures are short, they may seem railroady. I would not categorize a deep and creeping darkness as such. For instance, the player characters can bypass the town of Mayrin and go to Vermelon directly. Instead of exploring Vermelon, they can go to the mine directly. For players who like suspense and solving mysteries, this will be a fun adventure for them. For those who like battling monsters, this will not be a fun adventure for them. Okay, back to you, RPGmodsFan.
Thank you for watching. Hope this video has been informative and entertaining. Please subscribe, like, share, and comment. I do like feedback. Till next time, this is RPGmodsFan saying cheers, have a good day, and goodbye.